Welcome, everyone. I hope.
Thank you, really. Thank you for joining us. This has been a project of ours for some time. So this all kind of came up for us, and I think you can imagine this. We had started a procedure with a patient. It had gotten kind of tiring. Was cutting off some old crowns. Stuff that we weren't expecting was under crowns. And as you can expect, just right about that time, you get a call for a hygiene check, and it just wasn't a good time. The patient was tired, I was tired, but I needed to stop and go check on this person. So
Yeah.
I don't hardly remember walking in the room. Patient was already reclined. Hygienist was up cleaning the op, and I don't even remember saying hello. I kind of did my exam. Don't remember if there was any questions. Got up, left, and I don't remember much about it, but I remember what I heard as I was leaving. And that was, is he already done? That seemed kind of fast. Did my teeth look okay? And I didn't go back to remedy what I had done. My mind was already back in my op, in my restorative op. I'm not sure my mind ever left my restorative op. So it was, in reflection of it, I said, why would I take something that's such a pillar of our dental practices, something that we rely on is the return visits of our patients, and really just not give it much thought? Why would I kind of give a blow off to something that we consider such a pillar of what we do? So when David and I started talking about it, we came up with what we call the intentional hygiene exam. So this is a little of our information, but I'm a restorative doc in Arlington, Texas. My name is Mike Rogers. I've been in practice roughly 30 years. Through that time, I've largely had 2 full-time hygienists. So if you guys can imagine, I've done a number of hygiene exams. With me is my good friend Dave. Dave, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Dave Gordon. I'm a restorative dentist in a solo practice in Austin, Texas. Mike and I have known each other for over 20 years and has been kind of best friends in dentistry. But I've got 2 hygienists 4.5 days a week, and then another temporary hygienist or part-time hygienist who comes in on Fridays to help us out. I mainly do restorative dentistry, but I've over those time I've done everything. But the one consistent thing that has been there, regardless of what procedures I've tried to introduce or that I haven't been able to do well at, that the one consistent thing is I still have hygiene. I still have hygiene checks.
Yeah.
And so, every time I listen to Mike's story, I can plug in a patient. I can plug in a scenario. And if you ask my team, they could tell you it probably happened this last Tuesday, because it was a difficult day that we had to plow through. So it's been a constant, but it is part of our practice, and it's a bread and butter procedure that we all do, pretty much every day, and it doesn't really matter what kind of practice style you have, and corporate, non-corporate, whatever it is. And Mike and I have very similar philosophies and styles, but our practices are different.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
I agree.
Yeah. But we both have to do an exam. And when he went through that experience, for us, he drew the line in the sand and said, okay, Dave, we've got to come up with a better way. There's a time where we spend with the hygienist, who's a healthcare provider, ourselves and the patient, and we spend only a short period of time. We only get to do that once, twice, maybe 3 times a year at the most. And in that short exchange, we thought, how do we be present for the patient? How do we actually make a difference? And the questions that kept coming up is, does it make a difference in the patient's health? Does it make a difference on the choices they make to stay in our practice? Um, yeah. Does it make a difference in them helping us build our practice with patients with like values and what in referring patients because of some of the hygiene stuff that we've been through in Texas and shortages and finding the right people. One of the things we start to ask is how does that interaction actually affect the hygienist wanting to stay, in your practice with you?
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, how does that affect your daily stress? How does it get through? So when we looked at that, we came up with 6 simple steps, which we put together, as Mike said, for the intentional hygiene exam.
Yeah.
So the first step, as the story goes, how do I stop thinking about those crowns in room 3 and be present for Ashley in room 1?
Yeah.
And we started that by thinking, okay, separate yourself and get present. The way that we started our research was with a book that we read. And the book was, for the pre-exam ritual, was a book written called The Powerful Engagement. And The Powerful Engagement is a book written by a couple of sports psychologists, one of them, Jim Lair. And his real key in this book to me was how to create a ritual that really changed your mind and not only gave you a reset, but also recharge and a renewal of energy. And he had at the time, he was with at least 17 #1 business leaders and sports people in the world. So with that, he decided, hey, I love tennis. I'm going to focus on tennis. And they found that if you create a ritual in tennis between points, between sets, you will actually not only reset for the next step, but you'll also actually re-energize. And he had it down to 16 seconds. So he created the 16-second cure. On the previous slide, you can see that there's a link that you can go to. And in that link, it'll show you him talking about which hand the racket's in, how many times they bounce the ball. What he didn't expect was, as years of research following these people, it lowered your blood pressure. It reduced your heart rate. It reduced the cortisol levels. So the ritual was not only to reset, but it was to recharge. So you actually had more energy coming out of it. And so we developed that and called it the pre-exam ritual. So we developed specific steps to take us from what we thought was room 3 in the restorative care. And we did something to reset and recharge ourselves to go talk to our hygienist and our patient and make it a better day for them. So each individual comes up with specific steps. Mine was, I go to my sterilization sink and wash my hands, but I wash it with intention. And I go to this specific sink. And the sink itself is not important, but it has to be consistent. But to me, so it's this specific sink. So yeah, as I walk into sterilization, I pass our notes of our schedule, and I think, okay, hey, I'm now going in with Ashley. Nicole has told me that she did Invisalign. She had some bonding to do. What are we going to do? So I'm actually very intently thinking about Ashley now. I'm washing my hands. I'm really rubbing together for about 16 seconds, but my focus is on what we learned in the huddle that morning about Ashley. And it's not just washing your hands. It's not a routine. It is, hey, here are some specific steps that we're going to take to make sure that our mindset is done. And it just so happens that it kind of re-energizes and recharges you because your blood pressure is lower. It just gets you going. And so here's a little example of what it looks like.
So this is the sink where
That's
have
it.
that. So you pick, I mean, because is this the only sink you have in the office?
That's just the sink I have to go to, but my team doesn't understand.
Yeah. So there's a sink here, this op.
Yeah.
You've got another sink in this op. So, but the whole point of that ritual for you is you've got to go to that specific spot.
Nicole's waiting for me.
Yeah.
And so we do that, and as we go in, again, the part of it is my team all knows that, and you know, you see Becca trying to get out of the way. It's just fun because there's so many others, and the idea though is that you go in with intention, you do the specific steps, but you set yourself, you're resetting your mind to go in and be present for the patient.
Yeah. So I tried your washing hands thing. It didn't really work for me. And I've tried a number of different things. So one of our mentors, Rich Green, used to talk about how he would wait outside his, just outside his hygiene op, and he would stretch and he would try and release his energy, before he would go in to be present for that next patient. That I tried that, it didn't work.
Is that because you're not very flexible? Sorry.
Yeah. So in my office, my ops are outside of my lab, and then the hygiene ops are away from that. And so I put a little basketball goal in my lab, and I would stop and shoot a basket. And I thought that would kind of, take away from it. It didn't work for me either. So I finally settled on, I just put a bottle of water in my lab. I have another one in my office. And so if I get that call for a hygiene exam, I will stop in my lab, get a drink of water. And for me, it's to kind of wash away what I was doing, to be then present for what I need to go do. That is my ritual, is getting that drink of water. So
is it just normal drink of water?
It can be, but it's not always. Sometimes if somebody's in the lab, I did this once, and it just became kind of how we do stuff now. So I'll walk out of my op, I stop in my lab, take a deep breath, get a drink of water, and then I can go off to my hygiene exam. So it's not always like that, but that's if somebody's in there, that's what it is.
So again, the pre-exam ritual should be very specific, in a specific place, doing a specific thing, but it should have some intention to it.
Yeah.
Right.
Come up with something that works for you, that will stop what you had been doing to then start what you need to do for hygiene.
And again, it is about kind of resetting and recharging. And again, one of the things that I think through, and I tend to think through of stories to help me, remember and focus. And in January, I did a half marathon. And it was super cold out. It's about 65 degrees. That's cold for
cold Texas.
Yeah. And Court and Bethany are dropping me off, and Bethany's my running partner, and we're standing out there, and there's just thousands of people, and you really don't recognize, you're in your own little world, kind of like we are in our offices. And in past races, I would just run as fast as I could. And you've done races, so you know. But along the way, there are water stations. In the past, I would just take a drink and kind of throw it and go. But through what we've learned through the process of rituals and slowing your heart rate down, and slowing your blood pressure, and decreasing the cortisol, and actually coming out of that and being much more energetic, I stopped and slowed down through all of those water stations. And I found that I could take off, and not only did I have a better takeoff and a better race, afterwards I actually had better. So, our breaks, our stress breakers during that day, that pre-exam ritual actually gives you a stress break. And then it allows you to recharge. So at the end of the day, you still have a little energy.
Wow.
The one thing I didn't recognize until I was doing it, and I thought this was key, is as I slowed down, I was able to recognize the hundreds of people who are there helping me achieve my goal.
Hmm.
And I think about that towards our teams. As I'm going in to wash my hands, they're supporting us to help us reach the goal of having the patient's health.
Very nice.
And so, you know, think not only about what you're doing and being present, but know that the people around you are there supporting you to help you reach your goal. And that little slow second, you know, is a nudge you can give to your hygienist or something as you're walking.
Nice. Yeah, I hear that. I hear your story about races like that. I think, you know, as I come up on those stations now, I think I'm going to wash my hands. I think that'll reset me for the rest of my race. So, guys, you've come up with a ritual that works for you, and then obviously you've got to get into the room. So we call that in our next step, we call that the initial communication, because typically we walk into a room and we start to have some interaction with the patient. It doesn't typically start with just straight to teeth. So, you know, we tried that a number of different ways. If you heard from my story, I walked into a room and the patient was already reclined, and I kind of went straight into an exam process. But the positioning that we found could be very important. You know, we tried it with the patient reclined, the patient sitting up, me standing, the hygienist standing, both sitting. And what we ended up with was, if the patient was upright, I'm sitting on one side, the hygienist is sitting on the other, and we're all knee to knee and kind of eye to eye. The whole aspect of it just had a dynamic. Our good friend Mike Rolfus, he would call that a triangle of learning. You know, here recently I've heard that more in a triangle of care, because there's three of you looking at each other eye to eye, and in this we're all kind of in it together in a moment. So we found that it was important that if we did in that position, it just worked out great. Now, I know maybe in your office that doesn't work as well.
Yeah, and so as you see them sitting there, and we have one room that has enough room for this. In Becca's room, she stands because we don't have room for a chair, and we can't sit in this triangle, but we can still be in the triangle. And the approach is that we're both facing the patient, and the patient is facing both of us.
Yeah. So if it works in your office, great. We found that worked kind of best for us. But anyway, find some way to get in a position where you can have some conversations.
100%.
And so you start. Well, the other thing we found was, too much of the time we were starting with moments that were just kind of downers. So like here in Texas, we just spent a ton of the summer just going, well, how did you handle the heat? You know, how are you managing the heat? And it was just kind of, ugh. And then, you know, before that, it was, you know, how are you handling COVID? Yeah. Every conversation just kind of started down. Yeah. So we made a comment to say, or a project to say, we're going to start our conversation with something positive. So my positive piece is, I tend to go into the room, sit down and say, hey, Bob, tell me something new and exciting since the last time I saw you. Guys, most of the time you will get nothing. But if you pry into it a little bit, you will get some good feedback. I'll say, really, there's just nothing that's happened. And they say, well, I did go to Ireland this summer. Or
big stuff.
No, my granddaughter graduated in May. I mean, they'll start to tell you things that are actually important to me. It's exciting for them, but you have to kind of get into it with them a little bit. So, guys, it's not a throwaway question. It is not just a, hey, how you doing? If you do that and listen to understand and listen for different values, you can gain a lot of insights into what they find important to them. I'm listening for things like, if they answer with leisure, if they say, no, I wonder if that's important to them. How can I tie that into their health? if they mention retirement, it's like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
How do you intend to involve your dentistry in retirement? You can come up with things, listen for stuff. On top of that, they say things sometimes like, well, I have an anniversary coming
Yeah.
up, or I have a birthday coming up. And we saw that as opportunities in our meetings to go, hey, we heard today Bob is having an anniversary. Is there a gift that we could send them? It's a value added piece that we were picking up in the process.
So in that, you're trying to figure out what's important to this person.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then how can I potentially tie that, one, to their health, and two, to how can I, maybe do some value added things to increase my office.
So in the book, Unreasonable Hospitality, it tells you to do what with that information. Just, what do you send them a card? You send them a letter on stuff
It's
that you
really
hear?
just something that we just brainstorm and go, what can we do to make that valuable?
And from a aspect of, you're doing that because you care.
Correct.
And you've told me about the responses that you got, right? If you send someone some flowers or something.
Yeah, if you send flowers to their office and stuff like that, they're like, where are you getting flowers from your dentist? It's like, but you hope that it starts a conversation around how the relationship is different with that office than they would typically have somewhere else.
So it's a little bit of a practice builder.
Yeah, for sure. It can be. So we've done our ritual.
Yeah.
We've had some initial communication. We've got our triangle of learning, or triangle of care. But it's eventually we've got to stop that and go, okay, what are we here to talk about?
And when you do that, when you're, the goal is you're trying to go from what we call hello to health, right? You got to make the connection. And my connection is something different, but I still try to find out what's good in their life, right? But I still have to do my exam.
Mm-hmm.
So after we've talked and visited with them, we've got to start talking about teeth. The idea that we have is, we were in a study group with a guy named Dr. Rich Green, which Mike talked to earlier. And for years, he led us through some stuff. And one of the things that he did was ask us to read books. And one of the books he gave us was a guy by the name of Daniel Pink, and it's A Whole New Mind. And when we did that, the idea was we went, he described how people think of the right brain as emotion, which we connected to, and you think of the left brain as analytical. And as we lead into it, we're trying to make that shift with the understanding that both hemispheres are important. But if you can change from hello to health, from emotion to logic, it tends to alert the patient that, hey, this is good. Now, I tell you, the group that we were with was really 5 amazing dentists, right?
And then us.
And then us. So that was pretty fun.
Yeah.
But it was consistently, okay, how do we get into the exam? How do we go from not being rude to stop the patient and enjoying that, to actually doing what we're supposed to do? And that is simply by going, okay, hey, we've made the connection. How are your teeth and gums? That's my go-to. And they simply go, yeah, great. Here, let's talk about our health. And they'll start to begin on the conversation of what they experienced with their hygienist. And so for us, it's okay, hey, what did you hear? And what did you hear during your exam? Or, what concerns did you have? And I will tell you, Mike, there are several times, and I can ask the patient, I said, tell me about your teeth and gums. And they will look at me and say something they haven't told Becca.
Yeah.
And Becca's she's probably one of the most amazing hygienists I've ever seen. And because of that, she'll go, no,
yeah.
You immediately look, right.
I just spent 45 minutes with you. You didn't say anything about. Yeah.
So as you lead into it and you actually talk about stuff, you want to know the patient's perspective on what they heard. And really that's the start of our exam.
Yeah. And I tend to do what do you know about your dental health?
Yeah.
What are you noticing, or what have you learned about your dental health? Things like that. I want to try and get some insights from them of what do they know?
Yeah.
And they'll say things like, well, I told Donna I've got this sensitivity on my upper right. I've got, I think I'm not flossing as well as I need to. They'll give you some kind of feedback. But the whole goal is to go, okay, as the patient, what do you know and understand about your own dental health right now?
And part of that is, as you step back, as you're starting to go through this, you realize, hey, I am being present for the patient. They feel that. You've asked something positive. And as you kind of lead into and understand, okay, where's this patient in today? And each step's a building block. You know, you know, someone says, hey, I've got an ill mom. That may put them in a different place. And as you start to learn from them that, hey, I just haven't been doing so well because I've been traveling every week. It starts to give you some information to have a better conversation about their health.
Yeah. So we've done our ritual.
Yeah.
We've had some initial communication that's important. We've tried to lead into the conversation about dental health, and then once we've done that part, the next step for me is to turn to my hygienist and say, okay, well, tell me what did you learn about Bob today?
Mhm.
So, no, I'm not surprising them with that question. They know it's coming.
Yeah.
And so in an office that has good conversations, it's something where, guys, I'm going to ask you what you learned today about Bob. So I would hope that you have an answer of what you learned today about Bob. And we do that with each patient. That question is coming. So
Yeah.
in varying practice, you have different levels or how long somebody's been with you. I've had one hygienist that's been with me for lots and lots of years, and I have another one that's newer. So the aspects of the one, if you've been doing this a while, it's a review of records. It's understanding from our huddles, what do we hope to learn? What did we gain from last time? You get information that you know is important. And so they can ask questions about, did you buy, we talked about you getting a Sonicare last time.
Yeah.
Hey, how did that go for you? We talked about adding another brushing into the day. How did that work for you? You start to, she can start to get information. What am I learning about that patient for that time? A newer hygienist may have to ask things like, hey, this is my first time to see you today. What do you think would be important for me to know as I start to treat you today? They may ask different questions, or if it's a new patient to them and they're a seasoned hygienist, it's like, what do I need to know that would be important for me to treat you?
And I will tell you this, out of all the things that we started to develop, this was the biggest struggle for me, was how do I set my hygienist up in a good way so that she had great questions? Because really, they're spending the most time with them. They're the ones who can really peel the onion. And I think you helped me most with that, right? It was, I've got Becca, who's been there for over 9 years, and I've got Nicole, who's absolutely amazing, doing it for, over 20 years, but she's only been in my office for about 6 months. Well, it's September, so maybe 9. Yeah. And the idea is, okay, how do you, introduce what you want to do to either someone who's been there for a while or someone who's new to your practice? And so that's a big portion.
So I don't know, I can't say for sure what's going on across the country at this point, but
Yeah.
I know in our area, there has been a hygiene shortage.
Yeah.
So I use a temp agency for hygiene for almost 9-10 months.
Mhm.
And so I had an opportunity to talk to several temporary hygienists, fill-in hygienists through that. And I would ask them, it's like, why are you doing this? Why are you choosing to use a temp agency? And so often, the first answer was always, well, I like the flexibility.
Yeah.
And I would peel back the onion a little more and say, okay, outside of that, why is that? And if you really listen to them, so much of their answers were centered around hygiene wasn't what they thought it was going to be.
Correct.
Um, you know, with a little looking, the average career span of a hygienist is about 7 years.
So basically it's saying there's a lot that just aren't working
Right. So
very long.
The burnout rate is high.
Yeah.
And the reasons behind that were largely, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I'm going into it going, I want to be a health professional.
Yeah.
But you're met with anxious patients, the emotional hardships, the physical hardships. It's a lot that they weren't expecting.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, they often felt undervalued by the rest of the team. They were kind of considered a profit center more than, hey, am I a partner in their health for this? And so I found that asking this question to learn from the hygienist really made a big difference in how our connectedness started to work, how our triangle started to work. So it just turned out to be wonderful.
Well, the idea that again is as we go through these steps, they're all building on each other. But learning from the hygienist is again something that you've got to create ahead of time, and that just means spending time going, hey, as the hygienist, you are a provider of their health, and sometimes more important. And I've got patients that have come in and go, new patients come in and go, well, I was only at that practice because of the hygienist, and again, that's a lot of value for them. And I mean, we value our teams, all of them, but you hear that's one of the things we've heard, and how can we recreate the interaction between us two, to really create a collaboration of health.
Yeah. So learn from your hygienist, gather what information they know about Bob.
Yeah.
So we've heard from Bob, we've heard from the hygienist, and at that point we do need to kind of do the periodic exam. We need to do what we've talked about a lot of stuff here for over half an hour, and the truth is all that really happens pretty quick.
Yep.
You can do that in just a couple of minutes if that's what you choose. You can make it longer if that's what you want it to be.
And some of the keys are, you're just trying to make a connection. It's not perfection. So some of these steps you're like, hey, I got to go back and do one or the other. No, it's just a helpful system to help you progress.
Yeah.
And the next part of the system, obviously, like Mike said, is the exam itself.
Yeah. So you've got to do the assessment on your own.
Yeah.
So you lean the chair back, and you're going to start to do your periodic exam.
So as you go through that, a ritual, and our pre-exam ritual is really with so much intention about changing your mindset, where the assessment is a routine that you want to make sure you hit everything with that same intention. And so we try to look at okay, how can I go through an exam and make sure I hit all the points, along with making it really well done. And for us, we decided to do that in certain steps. And I don't know about it, y'all out there, or you yourself, Mike. But if you learn from the hygienist, or you learn from the patient, okay, I've got a sensitive tooth, and for me, I'm trying to make sure I'm doing my best work. So if I'd just done a crown on a patient, I immediately want to look at the crown. Yeah. I'm like, okay, good. How's that looking? How'd that turn out?
Yeah.
And so the idea of assessing it on your own, if put into a system and put into a routine, it will help you focus on what you're doing. And I always start by telling the patient, as we're in that triangles, hey, I understand you had some concerns today. What I want to do is make sure I look at everything first, and then I'll focus on that.
Yeah.
And that helps remind everybody that we're going to look at their main concern, but I'm going to look at everything as well. And I start, from from a aspect of outside in. So if we've got radiographs or images we took that day, I'm going to look at those. Then I'm going to start on that outside and look at the, the joints, the muscles, the soft tissue. I'm checking all of the stuff we need to on the outside. And then I'm going in and I'm going to look at the, the inside soft tissue and oral cancer exam. And I'm going to look at the teeth and gums. And in that order, I'm going to look on the upper right, and I'm going to do the upper left and then lower left and lower right. And then really focus on if there's any concerns. And I know the idea is, how do we do this in a manner that is systematic? And I found that is a great way to help me remind me to get everything.
Yeah, and I share the thought with you. It never fails. If the patient says something that is bothering him, the hygienist comments to it, and then I turn around, I almost turn that exam into a limited exam if I'm only focused on that, and then I forget to do the other stuff. But I think the only difference I heard was I do that more correctly, and I start from the inside and go out. So I actually start from 31 and go to 18 and then up and then gums. And,
so if you want to do it backwards,
yeah,
it's okay.
Correctly. So the whole point is just have a system by which you do it, and whatever that works, just to make sure that you don't forget something in the process.
Yeah. So whether you're doing it, from outside in or backwards, it doesn't matter as long as you're actually having a system that helps you support it.
Yeah, exactly.
So all right. So it's been a little over 30 minutes, and for those of y'all are still with us, I've got a one real important thing for you guys, and this is really worth the price of admission.
In a free webinar.
In a free webinar.
Yeah.
As you're assessing what you've done, and you're done with your exam, take just a second and really relay to the patient how well of a job the hygienist has done. How grateful you are that they've really improved their health, or they've stayed healthy because of the mutual team that they have, and not every office can have that. So make sure they are aware that they have a great hygienist taking care of them.
Yeah, there's something pretty nice about hearing, I'm not doing that great a job, or I've heard, hey, Donna really had to work hard on me today. And I get to say, well, I don't know how hard she had to work, but it sure looks great now.
Yeah.
It's just take that opportunity to say, man, this is really, you're being well cared for.
And I don't think that comes natural to a lot of us, because we, again, first thing I want to do is look at a crown that I how well did I do? And so natural gratitude sometimes is tough, specifically during a day.
Yeah.
And I'll share a hack with you that a consultant and a great friend of mine, Anna Salasports, gave me about 20 years. If you would take some type of token or object, and I use a coin given to me by Dr. Dan Belays, and the coin represents really a token of appreciation and gratitude. And I take that out, I put it in every morning, I put it in my left-hand pocket. And what that reminds me to do is make sure I'm giving gratitude to my team who's helping me. And the reminder is, after I give them that gratitude, I take it out of my left-hand pocket and I put it in my right-hand pocket. And what that does is, by the end of the day, if it's still in my left pocket, man, I've got to get on my phone or something and text a team member and say, hey, look, Mandy, Katie, fantastic job on helping with Mrs. Jones today. And what I've noticed is, over the 20 years that I've been doing it, in the morning when I'm grabbing that token, it really has become a way, like Mike talks about, starting off with a positive question. it really has started my day off with, okay, I'm going to give some gratitude today. And it just starts your day off well. So if you struggle with that, you'll get a token of appreciation, transfer it from your left-hand pocket to your right-hand pocket. And it'll give you something as a reminder that we're thankful for the team that supports us and helps us get our goals.
That's an awesome hack.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So guys, just to recap that sum, it's you've gone from your ritual to some initial communication, learning from the patient, learning from the hygienist, doing your own exam. And now we finish that, we set the patient up, and our last note here is to review and reinforce. So based on everything that you just took from what the hygienist spent in time and then what you've spent in time, we're gonna then say, okay, maybe that's just briefly a celebration of doing a great job. Maybe that's the next steps of what you found in the process. Maybe it's hey, some work we had to outline. But you're going to set them up and then have a conversation back in that triangle to say, hey, here's what was important. Here's what we need to reinforce. Here's maybe the next steps, reappointing, whether that's in the doctor's chair or just recall again. You're reviewing that piece. If you didn't hear the step that Dave said about providing some benefit to the hygienist for the job they do, hear this one. If you will, at that point, just take just a second, set them up, knee to knee, eye to eye, and just say thank you. Just stop and just say, I value, appreciate that you let us take care of you. It is a 4-second moment of gratitude, because the truth is we do need them to come back. We do appreciate them. They are a vital part of what we do every day. So just taking a minute and saying, hey, thank you. And I don't mean, hey, good to see you. I mean, no, thank you so much. Now, I will tell you, when you do that, you will be surprised at how often they say, what are you talking about? Thank you. Thank you for taking care of me. And it's a moment of gratitude between you that is extremely valuable, because they leave the appointment now feeling good about it, feeling good about the relationship they may have in your practice. So, that's.
And I tell you, there's so many times where we're walking out of the operatory and going, hey, thanks for coming. And again, it's just a split second, but it is a powerful part of our relationship.
So guys, we talk about these 6 steps. The truth is that they're not always easy to get them in. And even if you do 2 or 3 of them, it still makes for a more intentional hygiene exam. It still makes for a better moment where my brain is not still back working somewhere else. I'm in a room with intention with that person, even if I didn't quite hit everything.
Absolutely.
If I can hit 1 or 2 of them, it feels better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will say that, and one of the key points is, this doesn't take any more time than your normal hygiene exam. But it's a 6-step system that you can go through and do your best that day. And one of the questions we've gotten from time to time, when we talk about this, is time. And is this going to take me more time? And is it? And the answer is no. It will cause you to be more intentional, and
more mindful about what you're doing.
And really, when we talk about time, we've heard this, and I've heard this at least 100 times, and it doesn't always sink in. But it's not the amount of time you spend. It's how the quality of the time that you spend with them. And those of you with people in your lives that you love. And for me, that's my kids. And, as I start to think about that, and we were going through that, I always think about, my son Gregory, when he was younger and playing baseball. I was really involved. I was always a coach or in the dugout. And this little guy here, um, he was my buddy, but I was always there. As dentists, we can set our schedules to make sure that we're in certain spots. But my point is this: I had a neighbor who said, "Hey, after every game, win or lose, good or bad, get in the truck, put them in, and because a lot of these games go late during dinner time, you know, rather than talking about the game, talk about where we're going for dinner. What would you like to eat?" Well, unfortunately for kids and specifically in baseball, it comes down to a couple of key plays, and they either want to talk about the great hit that they had, or they want to talk about something that just didn't go well. And as Gregory grew, he outgrew my skill level as a coach.
Early.
Sure, very true. The point of it is, there was a game when he was older, and I was no longer in the dugout, but I was in the stands. I was watching the game. It was at the end of the game. He played first base. There's a runner on third. 2 outs. I got a phone call from a specialist. So I stepped out of the dugout. I stepped out of the stands and took the call. Well, they hit a dribbler, threw it to Greg. He dropped the ball. When he dropped the ball, it kind of crushed. It crushed him, as you could imagine, because they got the winning score, and he felt like he was responsible for losing the game. So we get in the truck, and the first thing I want to talk about is, where are we going for dinner? First thing he wants to talk about is, "Dad, did you see me drop that ball?" One of the hardest things you'll do, and at least one of the hardest things I've done is have that conversation going, "Yeah, no, I was on my phone. Gee, I didn't see it." And I don't know if his disappointment at that point in time was more in himself or me, but I knew my disappointment was within me. And so from that story, I still think about, hey, how can I be present for my patient?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't take any more time. It just takes me being present at that time. And it's what we have to do is really think about being there, to listen to the patient, but being there to see them succeed or not, but know that we're there.
So guys, as we kind of start to wrap this up, understand when we talk about an intentional hygiene exam, this is something that we're going to do regardless. If you can take some simple steps, do it with intention. It doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to go buy software. You don't have to, you don't have to do anything other than just make some time and intention with your team and say, this is how we want to approach it differently. And if a variation of this works for you and your practice style, if it's assisted hygiene or however it may be, just come up with something to go, no, we need to make this a better aspect of our practice. And I promise you, with a couple of years of doing this, it has changed the way we approach it. And it's actually made it easier for me to do.
Yeah. And I expressed earlier, Tuesday was a rough day, but I texted Mike and I'm like, you know what? Some of the principles that we follow, made my day more doable. And so, I didn't hit it all, but I hit some.
Yeah.
Perfect. The next question that we have is, do you both always do your hygiene exam at the end of the appointment? Sometimes it's easier to get there 10 minutes into the hour rather than to do 2 checks at the end of the hour. Any tips?
Yeah. Kind of answered that just a second there, but the system tends to work a little easier if it's at the end,
Mm-hmm.
but you can still manage it at any point in the process. So if it's 10 minutes into the hygiene appointment, maybe they haven't had as much chance to learn anything yet. But you can still hit a few of the points just to make it a more intentional hygiene exam.
And with that, because you think I'm doing it back to back, so that's basically 20 minutes that your other patient's been sitting there. So it does make it tough. And we have a morning huddle where we're going, okay, hey, what's important for this patient? What's important for that patient? And that's what I look at as I'm going through into sterilization. And hey, well, what was important to Ashley? How can I hit the buttons if I don't necessarily have the time? And again, so yes, sometimes it is like that, and sometimes again it's if I've got a break where the assistant can make a temporary or pack some cord, I'm going to take that opportunity even if it's not at the end of the appointment.
Yeah.
The whole intent of this is for you to have a better day. Your team, so when they go home, when you go home, and really the people that you love when you get there, that you have some energy to love them as much as they deserve.
There you go.
Well said. Thank you both so much.
Okay.
That's a fantastic webinar tonight.
Right. Thanks, guys. Enjoy it.
Thank you.